Welcome to Preservation Alaska's annual announcement of the 10 most endangered historic properties list. As you can see from the title, it became the 11 most endangered historic properties this year due to so many new nominations and the dire need of the properties to be saved. The review committee felt it important that these properties be recognized for their importance to Alaska's history. This announcement is a kickoff to Historic Preservation Month nationwide and to Alaska's Historic Preservation Month, sponsored by Preservation Alaska. So thank you for joining us today. Most properties have a website listed so that the audience can contact those properties for more information or for making donations to help preserve the property. The 4th Avenue Theater is located in Anchorage. The theater was built by Cap Lathrop, built beginning in 1941 and completed in 1947 after a halt during World War II. This was somewhat after the heyday of these styles of buildings. It was a large 960-seat first-run theater until the 1980s. There are 4 sets of murals, including a huge floor-to-ceiling pair, which depicts the commercial industrial growth to Alaska. The theater was designed by B. Marcus Pritica, a prominent Seattle-based architectural firm and leading designer of themed cinemas in America, in association with Seattle architect A. Pritica in the late 1930s. The 4th Avenue Theater is on the National Register of Historic Places. It's been on the register for 40 years, since 1982. 4th Avenue Theater is considered by experts to represent the culmination of the Art Deco movement in the U.S. Skilled practitioners of the art honed down the showy nature of the 1930 to 1950s fad style into a gem-like distillation of highest quality, beautifully integrated into regional motif and a creative, exciting individuality, unsurpassed by any other known example in the Pacific Coast region. Elected a fellow of the American Institute of Architects, Pritica was called the Dean of Theatrical Architects in America. The 4th Avenue Theater was one of the last movie theaters he designed. He was recognized by the Smithsonian several years ago for his work. It should be noted that the theater is an excellent example of the rarity of this style, often described as Art Deco, Streamline Modern, and Art Modern within the state and especially in Anchorage. It must be saved. The Ascension Church of Our Lord Chapel is located at Karlik on Kodiak Island. The Ascension of Our Lord Church was constructed in 1888 and is believed to be the second Russian Orthodox church in Karlik. The first was constructed before 1800. Architectural historian Allison Hoagland, in her book Buildings of Alaska, notes that this church is the oldest extant Russian Orthodox church in Alaska, as well as being one of the most professionally designed. The design is attributed to Charles Smith Hirsch, while the materials were purchased by the Alaska Packers Company and the Karlik Packing Company at the request of the local Alaska Native village chief, who chose to have a church built. Originally on the 10 most endangered historic properties list because of the danger of it falling into the Karlik River, it remains on this list due to its continued status as endangered. Thanks to an anonymous donation of nearly $500,000, the church was lifted from its foundation in August 2021 and moved about 80 feet inland within the diocese property for a temporary placement. Negotiations have been underway to find a new permanent location for the church upriver and closer to the new village. The new location will endeavor to retain the same east-west orientation, as well as serve as a beacon above the Karlik River for fishermen returning home, as it has for over 134 years. The new location will be approximately 4 to 5 acres in size to accommodate not only the church, but also a new cemetery with a special section for graves that will need to be relocated as the cliff continues to erode and expose human remains in the old cemetery. During the summer of 2021, steps were taken to examine the historical burial grounds using ground-penetrating radar and to survey the grave sites which date back to the first church constructed before 1800. The GPR further identified the historical significance of the area, with multicultural graves dating back to the early 1800s, when Karlik had one of the top producing salmon canneries in the Pacific Northwest. Over 200 graves were located on the church property. Bishop Road Chapel is located at Arctic Village. The log Bishop Road Chapel in Arctic Village is an iconic structure renowned not only in the subarctic region bordering the east fork of the Chandler River, but indeed across the state of Alaska. Built by local villagers during the post-World War II era, This extraordinary and unique chapel is the third iteration of a structure that was first created by the founding fathers of the village, Reverend Albert Tripp, at the turn of the 20th century. For decades, the chapel, situated in the center of the village, served as a focus of social and communal activity. It was, and is, an homage to Gwich'in identity. The church has been renovated over the years since it ceased to be used actively in the 1960s, most recently 2002 to 2005. Given its relevance and significance to the Gwich'in culture and indeed to the history and heritage of Alaska as a whole. However, given the harsh conditions of the region compounded by changing climate, a recent condition survey by Navision Architecture in 2019 has determined that after 2 decades, the structure is again endangered and in need of additional maintenance. Unless a series of repairs are undertaken soon, the building could be lost, this time possibly for good. In the past several years, local villagers have done their best to maintain the property. It is the #1 tourist attraction in the village and has been used as a centerpiece of communal celebration and pride since the day it was deconsecrated by Bishop MacDonald in 2004. As conditions have degraded in recent years, a key group of concerned citizens have sought to protect the items that once were housed in the chapel, such as the historic altar cloth and other important objects. Pews have also been removed. There was no doubt in the early 2000s and throughout the years that followed that the renovation project was a success, and yet, nearly 2 decades since the initiative was completed, it is apparent that it is now time again to address some needed repairs and maintenance concerns. To be sure, natural materials like logs are by definition difficult to protect, especially in a climate like that of the subarctic. Nonetheless, the main shell of the chapel has largely held, and for the most part, the repairs and renovation carried out 20 years ago clearly served to preserve the structure from disappearing altogether. Fort William H. Seward Hospital is located in Haines. The Fort Seward Hospital building is one of the anchor buildings within the fort. At 10,000 square feet, this building is key to the character of Fort Seward. The hospital building was built between 1902 and 1904. The style of architecture is representative of the popular neoclassic or Federalist style of the era, which is reminiscent of Greek classical architecture, featuring clean lines, cornices, and column porches. The hospital building is one of the largest buildings from the original fort. It has 4 stories, including a large basement and attic. Established in 1903, Fort William H. Seward, or Fort Seward, served as a U.S. military post until 1947 when it was abandoned, sold to a group of World War II veterans, and became Port Chilkoot. The area became a National Historic Landmark in 1978 and was renamed Fort William H. Seward. The military buildings frame a central parade ground with the lieutenants' houses on the top row, the captain's housing on the north side, the soldiers' barracks on the lower side, and the hospital building completes the frame on the south side of the parade grounds. The military hospital was equipped and staffed to perform routine checkups as well as surgeries. It served not only the men stationed at Fort Seward, but also the entire community of Haines as the only hospital in town for several years. For over 60 years, the hospital building was home to the renowned Alaska Indian Arts, a nonprofit organization dedicated to the preservation and continuation of traditional native craft and culture of the tribes of the Pacific Northwest Coast. AIA trained artists in Tlingit art and produced totem poles, masks, and other artworks, some of which are featured in the National Museum of the American Indian in Washington, D.C., the Burke Museum in Seattle, and the Alaska Native Heritage Center in Anchorage, as well as locations along the Northwest Coast. The hospital building suffers from decades of deferred maintenance. However, it was open and usable until the winter of 2019. That year, during a particularly harsh freeze, the heating system of the large hospital building went out and most pipes in the building froze and burst. The building was left inoperable and now in disrepair. Shingles and chimneys are broken, allowing water to leak inside, damaging the structure. Moss is growing on the roof, which is leading to more impairment to the roof tiles by allowing moisture to settle and degrade the shingles. The plumbing and heating systems need to be completely replaced. Interior sheetrock is loose and falling apart. Due to the hospital building's large size, it has been difficult and costly for the owner to repair. It is one of the largest buildings in Haines. As such, it has great potential as a community asset and could serve as home to an historical interpretation center, a community center, an art school, a business hub, a senior activity center, or any of a number of other roles. These potential uses would require significant eventual investment, but the immediate need is for the buildings to be repaired and preserved. Pilgrim Hot Springs is located 60 miles north of Nome. Pilgrim Hot Springs is located on a 320-acre tract of land that was originally surveyed as a homestead in the early 1900s. The property is accessible during 3 or 4 months of the year via the Pilgrim Hot Springs Access Road, a 7-mile frontier road built in the early 1980s, which connects the property to Cougarock Road or the Nome-Taylor Highway. A subarctic oasis located in remote northwestern Alaska, Pilgrim Hot Springs is nestled between Hen and Chickens Hill and the Kiglewat mountain range. The property is a lush tree oasis with an abundant geothermal resource. Pilgrim boasts hot bathing pools, warm fertile soil, and a unique history including pre-contact utilization by the indigenous population, Alaska Gold Rush history, railroads and dog sled trails, early aviation, and military use. Its time used as a Catholic mission, an orphanage for the victims of the 1918-1919 flu pandemic, agriculture use, as well as its most recent use as a recreation destination and tourist attraction. Pilgrim Hot Springs was used as an orphanage by the Catholic Jesuit diocese from 1918 to 1941. It was used during World War II as a place for soldiers' rest and relaxation, when the military presence significantly increased as a result of the U.S. and USSR Lend-Lease program. Since the 1950s, it was enjoyed primarily for recreational use by the people of the region and visitors to Nome. All the buildings in the immediate vicinity of the mission were constructed between 1910 and 1930. The church and the nuns' quarters are still structurally stable and retain most of their original architectural attributes, though they have been diminished through weathering and some vandalism. Other structures at the mission have not fared as well. Nearly all present some level of instability, and some have collapsed, such as the machine shop. Because of the mission's history and its historical and personal importance to local residents, it is imperative that a baseline be established to determine what efforts need to be undertaken to stabilize and preserve the structures. Pilgrim Hot Springs is an important destination for visitors to Nome, and many people travel there to visit the mission and soak in the hot tubs. Stabilization of the buildings and the development of interpretive signage would add greatly to that experience and would preserve the ambiance and history of this important place in Alaska's history. In 2021, Inuktitut LLC worked with an expert contractor, Skip Lyle, to install beaver filtration systems to mitigate flooding and infrastructure damage due to beaver activity. 2 beaver deceivers were installed in a culvert and within a local beaver dam to filter water through the property and reduce flooding. Since these devices were installed, the water level has dropped significantly on the property, and more of the original historic viewshed is visible. This is especially noticeable in front of Our Lady of Lourdes Church and the historic wooden bathing tub. High-Use Stamp Mill is located in Fairbanks. The High-Use Stamp Mill property is a historic property approximately 20 miles northeast of Fairbanks, Alaska. Situated in the hills and creeks where many other mines also thrived, the High-Use Stamp Mill remains a testament of historic underground mining in interior Alaska. On the main property is the stamp mill, a large red building built into the hillside for purposes of utilizing gravity in the milling process. There remains the 2 Joshua Hendy 5-stamp batteries, most of the diesel engine and generator. The jaw crusher still resides in the uppermost part of the mill. Although the property has degraded significantly and parts have fallen prey to vandalism, it is still one of the best and only surviving examples of the early underground mining and milling in interior Alaska. The gold deposit that the High-Use Mill building is situated near was known as early as 1912, and in one short year an adit had been driven 450 feet. In 1914, the mine was in full production, and a 5-stamp battery was moved from nearby Chatham Creek to process the precious ore. The mill building was built and added onto throughout the years to accommodate its 2 5-stamp batteries, jaw crusher, diesel engine, generator, a sauna, coal bunker, and assaying room. The mine operated until World War II, never going back into full production. The mill was last used in the early 1960s to process samples. The mine was originally owned and operated by Crates and Feldman. It was sold in the 1920s. Many prominent Fairbanksans own stock in the mine. The Highview Stamp Mill property is situated relatively out of the way. However, in recent years, the Kinross Fort Knox project's planned expansions loom dangerously close to the historic mine. Although it is the biggest threat, Fort Knox is not the only danger to Highview. Since it closed, vandalism has been rampant at the mine. There is no longer any glass in any of the historic buildings. Spray paint, litter, and other vandalism has taken place. The diesel engine has been somewhat dismantled over the years, and the generator in the mill has been cut open for some of its copper to be sold for scrap. Although in sad shape these days, the Highview Stamp Mill is not too far gone to be saved. The Bristol Bay boats are located in Naknek. This historic collection of 14 wooden Bristol Bay fishing boats that demonstrates the evolution from the days of the sail that began in the 1880s to the first powerboats legally allowed to fish the waters of Bristol Bay in 1951. This unique collection features rare and one-of-a-kind boats that range from early 1900s sailboats to conversions, which are sailboats that have been converted to host gas-powered engines and retrofitted with cabins to replace the ridge-pole tents formerly constructed with oilskins and wooden oars. The conversions range from those with the first small enclosed cabins and the later version with stand-up cabins. The collection also features several boats built by Bryant, which are some of the first wooden power boats designed and built specifically for their fishery. The collection also includes some of the last models of wooden boats designed and built by American Commercial that were made in the late 1970s before wood was replaced with other construction materials. A keystone in the collection is a fully restored 1932 sailboat, Libby's Kajiyung No. 5, which is fully restored with sails and all the riggings, anchor, and neck. Historically, there was a village site named Kajiyung located right by the Libby Cannery that was built on the Kwijak River. In 1951, 86 boats were motorized while 631 were still powered with sails. Within 2 years, in 1953, over 1,100 boats were motorized and only 62 boats in the fleet that remained were double-ender sailboats. The historic wooden boat collection of the Bristol Bay Historical Society represents an important part of fishery management in Alaska and remains an icon of the history, culture, and economy of Bristol Bay. These boats must be preserved, maintained, and displayed to protect the maritime culture resources of Bristol Bay. This historic collection of Bristol Bay fishing boats are all constructed with wood. In order to preserve and maintain them, they must be stored under cover and out of the elements. A number of the boats are stored under cover in warehouses, but others are stored outside in the elements and thus are subject to deterioration that comes with exposure to wind, rain, and snow. The Bristol Bay Historical Society is dedicated to preserving and sharing the history, culture, and values of Bristol Bay. The Historical Society currently owns and operates a museum facility located in the historic A.R. Davie Mercantile Building in Naknek. The current exhibition space available in the historic building is, however, limited, and the surrounding property needs to be developed to include a warehouse facility large enough to house the Society's extensive historic wooden boat collection. Packers Association Diamond Oak Cannery, located in South Naknek, that was slated to be torn down. The earliest structures in this cannery campus were built in 1901, and this structure is one of the last relics of this historic site that survived a devastating fire in 1985. All warehouse building materials have been relocated to Naknek, and plans to reassemble the building to serve as a new boathouse storage facility are underway. Construction of this facility will enable the Society to centralize the boat collection and get the boats that are currently stored outside and subject to deterioration outside in the elements to finally be stored safely under cover. The one-room schoolhouse located in Talkeetna. The building was constructed in 1935-36 and opened as a one-room schoolhouse the fall of 1936. The teacher lived in teachers' quarters on the second floor, and the first floor was the schools for grades 1 through 8. It also served as a community center/church over the years. There wasn't high school in Talkeetna until 1964. By 1971, there wasn't enough room for all of the kids, and the schoolhouse closed when a new elementary and new high school was built. The building went through renovation and opened as a museum in 1974. Small repairs were done when needed. The building got a new coat of paint in the 80s. In 2017, the old exterior paint job was abated due to lead paint, and the building returned to its original white color. Over the years, the small repairs on top of small repairs have added up to one really huge and sorely needed change. The old electrical, plumbing, and heating systems, as well as original windows, all need replacing. The building is now 85 years old, not necessarily as old as many historic Alaska buildings, but over the years, band-aids on top of band-aids have led to continuing issues. The back addition roof actually has a roof on top of a roof. There are still ice dams and leaks inside in winter. If nothing is done, the back roof could collapse. The electrical is in poor shape and could lead to fire. There is possible damage to the foundation that occurred in the 2002 earthquake that was never fixed. The structure needs numerous repairs. This winter, heavy snow loads sheared off the furnace, bent pipe, and it has been replaced back on the roof, but needs a permanent fix. Engineers looked at the buildings in September 2021 and came to the conclusion that the foundation is close to failure. The activity so far is hazardous material assessment completed in 2017, pre-development architect's assessment in 2018, collections assessment program and architect's assessment in 2020, collections assessment program's professional museum collections assessment report in 2019. The engineers assessed the property in the fall of 2021. Eldridge Rock Lighthouse is located near Haines in southeast Alaska. Eldridge Rock Lighthouse sits on a very small island located approximately 17 miles south of the town of Haines, Alaska. The island is the last southernmost in a string of islands extending south from the Haines Peninsula. Built in 1905, Eldridge Rock Lighthouse is the oldest original lighthouse in Alaska and the only remaining octagonal frame lighthouse of those built between 1902 and 1905. It is the only station not rebuilt. It was established because of many shipwrecks nearby, especially during the 1898 gold rush, when Lynn Canal was in heavy use. Eldridge Rock Lighthouse has been unmanned for over 45 years, and as a result, the buildings have fallen into disrepair and are considered endangered. The primary reasons for the state of disrepair are due to environmental and logistical challenge and no agency funding to maintain the lighthouse. The extreme weather and environmental conditions greatly contribute to the rate of deterioration. Logistically, the island is very difficult and expensive to access. This makes getting resources, humans, building supplies, etc., to the island very difficult. The concrete base of the lighthouse is falling and needs quite a bit of attention. As per their prior applications, the property description, history, and reasons for endangered status remain the same. The activities that they have taken to save the property began last summer, 2021, after receiving $20,000 contribution from the Rasmussen Foundation to kickstart remediation work. To begin, they had to focus on cleaning and encapsulation of lead and asbestos within the lighthouse building so that they could provide clean living spaces to future workers and volunteers, as well as halt the migration of lead paint out onto the grounds. In the summer of 2021, they were able to remediate the first and second floor hallways and 3 bedrooms, gaining a clean bill of health and air clearance for those spaces. Their real concern, and the reason that the lighthouse will remain endangered until repairs are complete, is water intrusion. The spalling concrete on the first floor solid concrete and cement base has continued at an alarming rate, both exterior and interior. At this stage, engineers have confirmed that it is structurally sound, but almost all of their fundraising is being prioritized for this repair, which is planned for June or July 2022. Likewise, the lantern room will be a constant source of water intrusion until they can repair the cracked glass and door latches. They have also discovered even more leaking through the roof and cupola into the attic and down into the building, which they have temporarily dealt with but will need a roof replacement in the next 5 to 10 years. The roofs of the various structures, 4 buildings on the island, are all in need of some level of repair to prevent water intrusion. Most wooden windows need to be repaired and repainted. Outside, the landscape needs attention to prevent the natural environment from taking over. Furthermore, there are environmental factors in and around the lighthouse that need to be cleaned up in order for the property to be safely used by the public. The steamer SS Nenana is located in Fairbanks. The steamer Nenana is a 5-deck, wooden-hulled Western River-style steamer sternwhaler packet built from clear, vertical grain, kiln-dried fir. The ship is a blend of steam, wood, and paddle wheel technology that is 237 feet long and weighs a total of over 1,100 tons. The steamer was commissioned and built in 1932 by the Alaska Railroad. She was prefabricated in Seattle, assembled in Nenana, launched into service in 1933, and run by the Alaska Railroad. The original design contained 24 berths, a dining salon, a smoking room, an observation room, a kitchen, a bakery, and men's and women's bathrooms, along with passengers' and officers' rooms with porcelain sinks and electric lights. She is located in Pioneer Park in Fairbanks. Years of neglect and deferred maintenance have brought the SS Nana, a beautiful piece of Alaskan history, to deplorable conditions. In April 2018, the Fairbanks North Star Borough blocked all entrances to the sternwheeler and closed off this beloved historic landmark to the public due to safety concerns. Dedicated community members organized into the nonprofit Friends of SS Nana and had the vessel inspected by the principal naval architect of Columbia Sentinel Engineers from Seattle during June of 2019. A report of needed repairs was generated for the group. The National Park Service Alaska Interior Region is offering technical assistance for the repairs and restoration of the vessel. Without substantial fundraising, advocacy, and a close partnership agreement with the Borough, we will lose the SS Nana, a historic sternwheeler that is the last of its kind. The 2021 update, the Fairbanks North Star Bureau, in response to strong community support, has committed maintenance funds for work on the SS Nana. They hired a design firm with a historic preservation consultant to prepare bid documents for repairs to the vessel. The work is scheduled to start with the cargo deck. They will be seeking further funds for interior and exterior restoration work. 2022 activities underway to save the property. The Fairbanks North Star Bureau adopted the cargo deck for repairs in the CIP Phase 1 repairs. Phase 2 is projected out past 2030 for the remainder of the boat. Bids for the Phase 1 repairs recently came in over budget by over $900,000. This puts Phase 1 in limbo at this time. The Friends of SS Nana continue to raise funds for repairs of the SS Nana and are working with the Fairbanks North Star Bureau to successfully restore the vessel. Pioneer Hall is located in Ketchikan. Pioneer Hall is a two-story wood frame building on post foundations constructed over bedrock. The building footprint is approximately 1,786 square feet. It is a steep, modified hip roof with an unfinished attic. The building has been altered on all four elevations and in its interior. Modifications were made to its front street facade in the early years and continue to be made to visible facades along Pioneer Way. It was built on a prominent site overlooking the waterfront, and its 50-foot flagpole was a beacon for early seafarers coming to Ketchikan. As the town grew rapidly in the years that followed, many now historic buildings began to surround Pioneer Hall. By the late 1920s, the commanding view earlier enjoyed by the Pioneer Hall was eclipsed by larger buildings, including the Gilmore Hotel and the City Hall. The building is situated on historic Pioneer Way, which is a stairway/pedestrian alley connecting Front Street to Main and Grant Streets. The Pioneer Hall is an iconic Ketchikan landmark from the community's earliest days. It was the first customs house located in Ketchikan, 1900 to 1907, and has been a prominent landmark in the community since 1900. In 1922, it began a new life of serving the pioneers of Alaska, Igloo number 16 and Igloo 7. The pioneers have continued to meet in this building over the ensuing nearly 100 years and continue to carry out many civic activities. This is the downtown historic district's and the city of Ketchikan's oldest building and a contributing building to the district's National Register of Historic Places designation. While the building has been altered over the years, the Pioneer Hall is individually eligible for the National Register by virtue of its place in Ketchikan's history. The building needs considerable rehabilitation to meet health and safety standards that would enable the pioneers to continue to use the property. The building needs immediate attention to its foundation and structural deficiencies, as well as extensive upgrades to its mechanical and electrical systems. There are numerous code issues that render the building unsafe to its members and visitors, and that, if corrected, would enable older members to visit the building and remain active in the organization for a longer period. The building's deficiencies have been enumerated in the draft report of the Historic Building Assessment. And that's our list for 2022. I thank you for joining us today. So please check out our website for information on preservation in Alaska, including how to join as a member and support our mission. Our website for May's activities can be found at savingplacesalaska.com. In closing, I would like to share this quote on the importance of historic preservation from 6 Practical Reasons to Save Old Buildings by Julia Ritchie. Regret only goes one way. The preservation of historic buildings is a one-way street. There is no chance to renovate or to save a historic site once it's gone, and we can never be certain what will be valued in the future. This reality brings to light the importance of locating and saving buildings of historic significance, because once a piece of history is destroyed, it is lost forever. In closing, I'd like to thank our sponsors of our 2022 10 Most Endangered Historic Properties program sponsors, which the funds go towards the grant awarded to at least one of the properties listed on the current year list. If you'd like to learn how to become a sponsor, please contact us.